Celeste Harrington had exactly 43 minutes of marriage before her new husband discovered she was already someone else's wife. But when James Ashford confronted her in their Vineyard Estates master suite, demanding answers about her missing first husband, Celeste's whispered response would turn their wedding night into Melbourne's most twisted crime scene.
Careful, darling. Men disappear all the time in my world.
If you're drawn to stories where wealth, deception, and deadly secrets collide in Australia's most elite circles, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss how this twisted tale unfolds. But let's go back to where it all began. March 18th, 2023, when the Yarra Valley's autumn leaves were turning gold and the Ashford estate was preparing for the wedding of the decade. The property stretched across 200 acres of premium vineyard land, its Renaissance-style manor house sitting like a crown jewel among rows of perfectly manicured Shiraz and Chardonnay vines. This wasn't just any wedding venue. This was the ancestral home of the Ashford family, who had been producing award-winning wines since James's grandfather planted the first vines in 1967. The estate was worth an estimated $40 million, and tonight it was hosting a celebration that would cost nearly $8 million. James Ashford stood on the terrace overlooking his family's empire, adjusting his Tom Ford tuxedo for the third time. At 34, he had everything a man could want: generational wealth, a thriving business that exported wine to 37 countries, and in less than 2 hours, he would marry the woman he believed was his soulmate. He had no idea that the woman walking toward him down that aisle was already legally bound to another man, or that her first husband's body was buried beneath a Queensland vineyard 300 kilometers north. Celeste Harrington was getting ready in the estate's west wing, surrounded by 5 bridesmaids and a team of stylists who had transformed the bridal suite into something resembling a high-fashion photo shoot. She sat perfectly still as the makeup artist applied the final touches, her reflection in the antique mirror showing a woman who looked every bit the part of Australia's next wine dynasty queen. At 31, Celeste was stunning in a way that photographers struggled to capture. Sharp cheekbones, ice-blue eyes that seemed to see through people, and honey-blonde hair that fell in perfect waves down her back. But it wasn't just her beauty that had captured James Ashford's attention 18 months earlier. It was her mind. She held a master's degree in finance from Melbourne Business School and had built a reputation as one of Sydney's most sought-after investment consultants. She spoke 4 languages, could discuss everything from derivatives trading to Burgundy wine classifications, and had a way of making powerful men feel like they were the only person in the room. What James didn't know was that Celeste had specifically targeted his family's business, that their chance meeting at a wine industry conference in Sydney had been anything but chance, that she had spent 3 months researching the Ashford family before engineering that first conversation. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 6 o'clock, timed perfectly to catch the golden hour light that would make the photographs look magazine perfect. 300 guests had traveled from across Australia and overseas, including politicians, celebrities, and the country's business elite. The Ashford family had spared no expense. French champagne flowed like water. The flowers alone had cost $200,000, with rare orchids and roses imported from Ecuador. A string quartet played Vivaldi as guests took their seats in the garden, where white silk drapes billowed in the gentle autumn breeze. James's mother, Patricia Ashford, sat in the front row wearing Chanel and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had never fully warmed to Celeste, though she couldn't articulate exactly why. There was something about the younger woman that felt calculated, rehearsed. But James was besotted, and Patricia had learned long ago that trying to interfere in her son's romantic choices only pushed him further away. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting everything in that perfect golden light, the music shifted to Pachelbel's Canon in D. The guests rose as Celeste appeared at the end of the white carpet, and a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. She wore a custom Vera Wang gown that had taken 6 months to create, its ivory silk catching the light like liquid gold. A cathedral-length veil trailed behind her, held by her youngest bridesmaid. On her left hand, carefully positioned so it wouldn't interfere with the wedding ring James was about to place there, was a vintage sapphire ring that had belonged to her grandmother. Or so she claimed. In truth, the ring had belonged to Marcus Chen's mother, and Celeste had taken it from his belongings before she reported him missing. James watched her walk toward him with tears in his eyes, completely unaware that the woman he was about to marry had already stood an altar once before, just 3 years earlier, in a small ceremony in Singapore. That marriage had never been legally dissolved, because you can't divorce a man who's been declared missing, but not legally dead. And Celeste had very specific reasons for keeping Marcus Chun in that liminal state, neither fully alive nor officially deceased. The ceremony was flawless. The celebrants spoke about love, commitment, and building a future together. James's voice was steady as he recited his vows, promising to love Celeste in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death did them part. Celeste's responses were equally perfect, her voice clear and confident. She looked directly into James's eyes as she promised to honor and cherish him for the rest of their lives, and no one watching could have detected even a flicker of deception. When James slipped the platinum wedding band on her finger, right beside the sapphire ring she'd stolen from a dead man, Celeste smiled with what looked like genuine joy. The kiss that sealed their marriage was passionate enough to make some of the older guests look away, and when they turned to face their applauding guests as husband and wife, they looked like something out of a fairy tale. The reception that followed was even more elaborate than the ceremony. Dinner was a 7-course affair prepared by a Michelin-starred chef flown in from Sydney. Tasmanian lobster, Wagyu beef, gold leaf desserts. The Ashford family's finest wines were served throughout the meal, including a 1967 vintage from the year the vineyard was founded, worth $15,000 per bottle. Speeches were made. James's father spoke about legacy and family. Celeste's maid of honor, a finance industry colleague, told carefully edited stories about their friendship. James himself gave a toast that had half the guests in tears, talking about how Celeste had changed his life and how he couldn't imagine his future without her. If only he knew how right he was, though not in the way he imagined. As the evening progressed and the champagne continued to flow, no one noticed Celeste checking her phone repeatedly, her expression flickering with something that might have been concern. No one saw her step away from the reception for a whispered phone conversation that left her face pale beneath her professionally applied makeup. And no one suspected that in approximately 3 hours, when she and James finally retreated to the master suite for their wedding night, everything would unravel in the most catastrophic way possible. The fairy tale was about to become a nightmare, and Celeste Harrington Ashford was running out of time to decide whether she would become a victim or ensure there was another one instead. 3 years before she became Mrs. James Ashford, Celeste Harrington was Mrs. Marcus Chun, and she was already planning her first husband's disappearance. The marriage had started in Singapore in 2020, a whirlwind romance between an ambitious finance consultant and a tech investor who seemed to have unlimited wealth. Marcus was 42, handsome in an understated way, and had made his fortune developing software for Asian banking systems. He was also trusting to the point of stupidity, which was exactly what Celeste had been looking for. Their wedding had been small, intimate, just 20 guests at a boutique hotel overlooking Marina Bay. Marcus's family, wealthy Singaporeans with old money and traditional values, had attended with polite reservation. They sensed something calculating in Celeste, the way she assessed everything with those cold blue eyes. But Marcus was deaf to their concerns. He was in love, and love made him blind. For 18 months, Celeste played the role of devoted wife while systematically learning everything about Marcus's financial empire. She discovered he had investments across Southeast Asia, property in 3 countries, and most importantly, a $5 million life insurance policy with her listed as the sole beneficiary. She also discovered his weakness for taking risks, for trusting the wrong people, for believing that his charm and money could solve any problem. In late 2021, Celeste convinced Marcus to invest in a Queensland vineyard opportunity, a struggling property near Brisbane, she told him, that could be transformed into a boutique wine operation. She had done extensive research. She showed him projections and market analysis. Marcus, who knew nothing about wine but trusted his wife's financial expertise, agreed to visit the property. They flew to Queensland in October 2021, rented a car, and drove to the remote vineyard. The property was as run down as Celeste had promised, but it had something else she hadn't mentioned: complete isolation. The nearest neighbor was 8 kilometers away. Cell phone reception was non-existent. It was the perfect place for someone to disappear. What happened during those 3 days in Queensland, only Celeste knows for certain. Marcus's rental car was found abandoned on a coastal road 2 weeks later. His phone, wallet, and passport were inside, but Marcus himself had vanished without a trace. The police investigation found no signs of foul play, no witnesses, no body. Just another missing person case in a country where people occasionally walk into the bush and are never seen again. Celeste played the devastated widow perfectly. She gave tearful interviews to local news stations, pleaded for information about her missing husband, and worked with police investigators who found her cooperative and genuinely distressed. She waited the required time period, filed the paperwork to have Marcus declared legally dead for insurance purposes, and collected the payout. But declaring someone dead for insurance wasn't the same as obtaining a legal death certificate for divorce purposes. Marcus Chin remained, in the eyes of Australian family law, her legal husband. And that suited Celeste just fine, because she had already identified her next target, James Ashford. She had spent months researching Australia's wine industry, looking for the perfect combination of wealth, vulnerability, and family drama. The Ashford checked every box. James was recently divorced from his first wife, emotionally vulnerable, and desperate to prove he could have a successful marriage. His parents were aging, and succession planning for the family business was becoming urgent. Most importantly, James had complete signing authority over significant company assets. Celeste engineered their meeting at a Sydney wine conference in September 2022. She positioned herself near the Ashford Vineyards display, asked intelligent questions about their export strategy, and waited for James to notice her. It took exactly 12 minutes. Their first conversation lasted 40 minutes, and by the end of it, James was completely captivated. The courtship that followed was textbook manipulation. Celeste was everything James had ever wanted: intelligent, sophisticated, interested in his business, and seemingly independent enough that she didn't appear to be after his money. She made him chase her, creating just enough distance to keep him obsessed. She studied his interests, his insecurities, his relationship with his parents. She learned what his first wife had done wrong and made sure never to repeat those mistakes. When James proposed after just 8 months, Celeste acted surprised and delighted, but she had been expecting it for weeks. She had carefully calculated every move to lead him to that moment. The wedding planning that followed gave her even more access to the Ashford family finances, as she helped James coordinate the expensive celebration. She learned about bank accounts, property holdings, investment portfolios. She was building a complete picture of what she would have access to as James's wife. But there was a problem Celeste hadn't anticipated. 2 weeks before the wedding, she received an email that made her blood run cold. It came from an anonymous account, with no message, just a single attachment: a photograph of Marcus Chun, very much alive, standing outside a cafe in Kuala Lumpur. The timestamp on the photo was from 3 days earlier. Someone knew that Marcus wasn't dead. Someone knew that Celeste's marriage to James would be bigamy. And someone was watching, waiting to see what she would do with that information. Celeste had spent the final 2 weeks before her wedding trying to trace the email's source, trying to determine who was threatening her carefully constructed plan. She had also been forced to consider darker options, including whether she would need to ensure that James Ashford suffered the same fate as Marcus Chun if her secret was exposed. As she danced with James at their wedding reception, laughing and playing the blissful bride, Celeste's mind was calculating odds and planning contingencies. She checked her phone obsessively, waiting for another message from her mysterious blackmailer. And when the wedding finally ended and she and James retreated to the master suite, Celeste was prepared for confrontation. What she wasn't prepared for was discovering that James had his own secrets, and that her new husband had spent the last week conducting his own investigation into her past. The master suite at Ashford Estate had been decorated for romance. Rose petals scattered across silk sheets, champagne chilling in a silver bucket, candles casting soft shadows across the antique furniture. But when James Ashford closed the door behind them at 11:47 p.m., the atmosphere shifted from romantic to something far more dangerous. Celeste kicked off her heels and reached for the champagne, playing the role of eager bride. Finally alone, she said, her voice honey-sweet. "I thought we'd never escape." James didn't move from the door. He stood perfectly still, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not desire, not joy, but something colder. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Celeste turned to face him, champagne glass halfway to her lips. Her mind was already racing through possibilities, calculating responses. "Talk. Darling, we've been talking all night. Can't this wait until tomorrow?" "No." James walked to the mahogany desk near the window and pulled out a manila folder. The gesture was deliberate, controlled. "It can't wait. Because in approximately 8 hours, our marriage certificate will be officially filed, and I need to know the truth before that happens." Celeste set down her glass carefully, her expression shifting to concern. "James, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Marcus Chun." James opened the folder, pulling out printed documents and photographs. "That's what's going on. Your husband, your first husband, who you claim died in Queensland 2 years ago." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Celeste's face remained perfectly composed, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the dresser. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." James's voice was still controlled, but anger simmered beneath the surface. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago. Cost me $40,000, but it was worth every cent to discover who I was really marrying." He spread photographs across the bed. Marcus Chun at a cafe in Kuala Lumpur. Marcus Chun entering an apartment building in Bangkok. Marcus Chun alive and well and living under a different name in Southeast Asia. The dates on the photos range from 6 months ago to just 2 weeks before the wedding. "Your missing husband isn't missing at all," James continued. "He's been living in Malaysia for 18 months, using the name Michael Chong. He's terrified to come back to Australia because he thinks you'll kill him. Because apparently, you already tried once." Celeste's mind was working at lightning speed. The anonymous email. The photograph. It hadn't been a blackmailer. It had been James, testing her, watching to see what she would do. She had underestimated him completely. "Let me explain," she started, but James cut her off. "You used me. You targeted my family, researched our business, engineered our entire relationship, so you could get access to our money. Just like you did with Marcus. Except with him, you actually tried to kill him." He told the investigator everything. How you lured him to Queensland, how you poisoned his food, how he barely escaped with his life. "That's not true." Celeste's voice was sharp now, the sweet bride facade cracking. "Marcus is a liar. He embezzled money from his own company and fled the country. I'm a victim in this." "Really? Then why didn't you tell me you were still legally married to him? Why didn't you mention that your widowhood was fraudulent, that you collected insurance money on a man who isn't dead?" James took a step toward her, and his voice rose. "We're not legally married, Celeste. This entire wedding is a sham. You committed bigamy. You committed fraud. And I'm betting if the police looked hard enough at that Queensland property, they'd find evidence of attempted murder." The mask dropped completely. Celeste's face transformed into something cold and calculating, all pretense of love or vulnerability gone. "You don't want to go to the police, James." "Why not? Because you'll claim you love me? That this was all real?" He laughed bitterly. "I already called them. They're coming tomorrow morning to take your statement. I'm filing for annulment, and you're going to cooperate with their investigation into Marcus's disappearance, or I'll make sure you spend the next 20 years in prison." Celeste moved toward him slowly, deliberately, and something in her expression made James instinctively step back. "You called the police," she said softly. "That was a mistake. Are you threatening me?" James tried to sound confident, but his voice wavered slightly. "You're in my house, surrounded by 300 wedding guests who are still partying downstairs. What exactly do you think you're going to do?" Celeste smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression James had ever seen. She reached into her designer clutch and pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages before holding it up for him to see. "Marcus Chun isn't the only person I've made disappear. There was someone before him. A business partner who got too curious about my methods. He went missing in Thailand in 2019. They never found a body." "You're insane." James backed toward the door, but Celeste moved faster, positioning herself between him and the exit. "Careful, darling," she whispered. "Men disappear all the time in my world. Especially men who think they're smarter than me. Especially men who threaten my freedom." James's hand went to his pocket, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling for help. Go ahead. Tell them your wife threatened you. Tell them you're afraid." See how that plays out for the great James Ashford, cowering in his bedroom on his wedding night. Her voice dripped with contempt. "Or we can discuss a more civilized solution. You give me what I want, a substantial divorce settlement, and I disappear. No police, no investigations, no scandals. You get to keep your reputation intact. I'm not giving you anything. You're going to prison." Celeste's expression hardened. "Then I suppose we have a problem." What happened next would be debated in courtrooms and investigated by homicide detectives for months. But in that moment, in the candlelit master suite of the Ashford estate, only two people knew the truth. And by dawn, only one of them would be alive to tell their version of the story. The fairy tale wedding was about to become Australia's most shocking murder scene, and the question of who was predator and who was prey was about to be answered in blood. The sound of breaking glass shattered the tension. James had thrown his champagne flute against the wall, the crystal exploding into glittering fragments that caught the candlelight like tiny stars. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "Get out of my house now, or I swear to God I'll drag you out myself." Celeste didn't move. She stood between James and the door, perfectly still, her wedding gown gleaming in the low light. Her face had transformed into something alien, devoid of the warmth and charm that had captivated him for 18 months. This was the real Celeste, the predator beneath the beautiful surface. "You don't understand your situation," she said softly. "The moment you called the police, you became a problem that needs solving. And I've gotten very good at solving problems." James lunged for the door, trying to push past her, but Celeste was faster than he expected. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. They struggled for a moment, James trying to break free, Celeste refusing to let him reach the door. He was stronger, but she had the advantage of position and something else: absolute ruthlessness. "Let go of me." James yanked his arm free and stumbled backward, catching himself against the bedpost. His phone had fallen during the struggle, sliding under the dresser. "This is insane. People know I'm in here with you. My parents, the guests, everyone saw us come upstairs together." "Exactly." Celeste's smile was cold. "Which is why, when they find you dead tomorrow morning, I'll be the devastated widow. Again, tragic accident. Champagne, passion, a terrible fall. These things happen on wedding nights." James's eyes darted around the room, looking for anything he could use as a weapon or a way to escape. The windows overlooked a 3-story drop to the terrace below. The door was blocked by Celeste. His phone was out of reach. He was trapped. "You won't get away with this," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I told the investigator everything. I left documents with my lawyer. If anything happens to me, the police will know exactly where to look." "Will they?" Celeste moved closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Or will they find a grieving widow who cooperates fully with their investigation? Who explains that her new husband had been acting strangely all evening, drinking too much, seemed agitated? Who shows them the prenuptial agreement he insisted on, protecting his family's assets? Who suggests that maybe he regretted the marriage, that maybe he did something desperate?" The implication hung in the air like poison. She was going to kill him and make it look like suicide. James made his decision in a split second. He grabbed the champagne bucket, ice and water sloshing, and hurled it at Celeste's head. She ducked, but the momentary distraction gave him the opening he needed. He rushed the door, got his hand on the handle, and pulled it open. The hallway beyond was empty. The wedding guests were still in the reception area 2 floors below, music and laughter echoing up through the manor house. James opened his mouth to scream for help, but Celeste slammed into him from behind, driving them both into the hallway. They crashed against the antique table that held a Ming Dynasty vase, sending it smashing to the floor. James tried to crawl toward the stairs, but Celeste grabbed his ankle, dragging him back. He kicked out, his foot connecting with her shoulder, and heard her grunt in pain. "Help!" James finally found his voice. Someone help me. But the house was massive, and the reception area was too far away. The music was too loud. No one could hear him. Celeste pulled herself up, breathing hard, her perfect hair falling loose from its elegant updo. Her wedding dress was torn at the hem, smeared with champagne and dust. She looked like something from a nightmare, beautiful and terrifying. "You should have taken the deal," she said. "You should have just paid me and let me go." She picked up a heavy bronze sculpture from the hallway table, a family heirloom worth thousands of dollars. James saw it coming and tried to roll away, but his shoulder hit the wall. The sculpture came down with devastating force. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. Once, twice, 3 times. When it was over, Celeste stood above James Ashford's motionless body, breathing heavily, the sculpture still gripped in her hand. Blood pooled on the antique Persian runner, spreading slowly across intricate patterns that had been woven a century ago. Her white dress was splattered with red, looking like some macabre work of art. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at what she had done. Then her survival instincts kicked in. She dropped the sculpture, staggered back into the master's suite, and locked the door. Her mind was racing, calculating, planning. She had minutes, maybe less, before someone discovered the body. She needed to create a narrative, establish an alibi, transform herself from killer to victim. Celeste stripped off her bloody dress, hands shaking as she fumbled with the zipper. She pulled on a white silk robe from the bathroom, deliberately tearing it at the shoulder. She ran her hands through her hair, messing it up further. Then she did something that would have impressed method actors worldwide. She bit down hard on her own lip until it bled, creating the appearance of a violent struggle. She picked up the phone and dialed reception, her voice perfectly calibrated to convey terror and confusion. "Please, someone help. My husband, something's wrong. Please send someone immediately." Then Celeste Harrington sat on the edge of the bed, positioned herself carefully, and waited for the police to arrive. She had killed before and gotten away with it. She would get away with it again, or so she believed. What Celeste didn't know was that James Ashford had installed security cameras in the hallway 3 months earlier, after a break-in at a neighboring estate. And everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes had been recorded in perfect high-definition clarity. The first responders arrived at Ashford Estate at 12:33 a.m., finding wedding guests still celebrating, while something darker had unfolded upstairs. Senior Constable Rebecca Martinez found Celeste on the master suite bed wearing a torn robe, lip bleeding, hair disheveled. But her eyes were too calm, too focused. This wasn't shock. This was performance. "He attacked me," Celeste said, her voice trembling perfectly. "We were arguing, and he lost control. I tried to fight him off, but he was stronger. We struggled in the hallway, and then—" She dissolved into carefully calibrated sobs. Detective Inspector Nathan Cross arrived 40 minutes later. When he walked into that hallway and saw the blood patterns, the body position, the weapon placement, his instincts screamed murder, not self-defense. "Take her statement," he told Martinez. "And someone find James Ashford's phone." What happened next changed everything. While Celeste repeated her story downstairs, Cross's technical team discovered security cameras, discreetly installed 3 months earlier. Cross watched the footage in James's study, and what he saw removed any doubt. The cameras captured everything. James fleeing, screaming for help. Celeste pursuing him, attacking him, beating him with the sculpture. The final blows. And then Celeste's calculated transformation from killer to victim, tearing her robe, biting her lip, rehearsing her traumatized expression. "Get her in an interview room," Cross said quietly. "We have our killer." The arrest happened at 2:15 a.m. "I don't understand," Celeste protested as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I was defending myself." "We have you on camera," Cross said flatly. "We have everything. Stop lying." For the first time, Celeste's mask shattered. She realized James had been smarter than she thought. He had protected himself, even in death. The investigation unraveled Celeste's entire history. James's private investigator came forward with evidence about Marcus Chun. Queensland police reopened their missing person case. And then Marcus Chun himself contacted Victoria Police from Kuala Lumpur, offering to testify. Marcus flew to Melbourne 2 weeks later. He described how Celeste had targeted him, manipulated him, poisoned his food during their Queensland visit. How he had realized what was happening and fled in the middle of the night, too terrified to come forward. "She's done this before," Marcus told Cross. "Before me, there was David Richardson. He disappeared in Thailand in 2019. She mentioned him once when she was drunk, said he had gotten too curious. I think she killed him too." Thai police reopened Richardson's cold case, finding enough evidence to charge Celeste with conspiracy to commit murder. The trial began in August 2023. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The security footage showed Celeste chasing down and killing her husband in graphic detail. Marcus testified about her predatory pattern. Financial experts traced her fraudulent insurance claims. Forensic evidence proved she had staged the crime scene. Celeste's defense claimed temporary insanity, but the camera footage destroyed any sympathy. The jury watched her calculating, performing, transforming herself into a victim while James's blood was still warm. The jury deliberated 6 hours. The verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Justice Helen Morrison addressed Celeste directly during sentencing. "You are a predator who targeted vulnerable men, exploited their trust, and killed them when they became inconvenient. James Ashford protected himself with cameras, and still you murdered him on what should have been the happiest night of his life. You have shown no remorse." Celeste was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 35 years. Additional charges added another 15 years. She would be 66 before she could apply for release. Patricia Ashford attended every day of trial. When the sentence was read, she simply nodded and left. She established the James Ashford Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of financial and romantic fraud. The Ashford estate still operates as one of Australia's premier vineyards, now run by James's brother Thomas. The master suite was completely renovated, though staff members still feel uncomfortable near where James died. Marcus Chun returned to Singapore and legally dissolved his marriage to Celeste, grateful that James's foresight had exposed her before she could claim more victims. The case became a cautionary tale about romance, fraud, and whirlwind relationships with people who seemed too perfect. True crime documentaries analyzed every detail. Law enforcement worldwide studied Celeste's methods to identify similar predatory patterns. In Silverwater Women's Correctional Center, Celeste serves her sentence as a model prisoner. Quiet, polite, keeps to herself. Some guards say she still has that calculating look, like she's planning her next move. But the wedding guests who attended that fairy tale celebration in March 2023 will never forget the morning after, when they woke to find their host dead and the beautiful bride revealed as a killer. The Yarra Valley's most expensive wedding had ended in blood just 43 minutes after the vows were spoken. And James Ashford, who had loved enough to marry but been smart enough to protect himself, had gotten justice even from beyond the grave.